Hello everyone. Today we're going to be taking a look at one of the most important things in achieving a successful training session. What am I talking about? We're looking at the warm-up. Now, the warm-up is important for two key factors. Number one, and this is what most people think of, is we're looking at warming up the body, preparing physically for the training session that we're about to perform. The second part, and I would argue that this is even more critical, and one of the things that I really try to enforce with my athletes on a day-to-day basis, is mentally. This mental stimulation is just as, if not more important than the physical stimulation. You must have both in order to achieve a good warm-up. You want the body to be warm, you want it to be stimulated, and you want it to be mobile, but you also want to achieve the right mental state before getting into your practice so that you're prepared and ready for the training that you're about to do. Here's a couple notes on mental preparation. One thing I always try to keep in mind, whether it's in the warm-up or in my training session or in my day-to-day life for that matter, and one of the biggest things that I preach to my athletes, courtesy of Mr. Josh Waitzkin, the author of one of my favorite books, The Art of Learning. One of the quotes that he has in that book, he says, "How you do anything is how you do everything." And I believe this to the core. You must apply this principle to your warm-up. If you cannot focus on the smallest details, you will not be able to focus on the biggest details. When I take a look at my athletes, the athletes that excel, the athletes that succeed, that learn the quickest, that get skills the fastest, they are also the ones that pay attention to the littlest nuance. Even when I consider the difference between a recreational athlete and a competitive athlete, the biggest thing that separates the two is their ability to pay attention to detail. Don't leave this to chance. And it begins as soon as you walk into the gym. Once you're moving through your warm-up, you must be focused. You must gain a deep and technical understanding of the exercises that you're doing and do them with the most care that you absolutely can. This can be a little tricky. Some days you don't want to train. Some days you don't feel like being there. That's okay. It all matters on how your warm-up goes. A lot of the time, even if I don't feel like training, I tell myself if I can make it through the warm-up, I'll be able to make it through the training session. More often than not, by the time I finish my warm-up, I'm ready to go. It acts almost as a stimulus for me, as a trigger to get into the zone, so I make sure that I do a very consistent warm-up. I try to use the exact same exercises so that you can gain a really deep and technical understanding of the movements, of the patterns, and get your mental state ready and primed for the more technical, more advanced work that you're about to perform. If you leave this to chance, if you go in and do a different type of warm-up every single day, your mental priming will not be the same. When we look at competition preparation with competitive athletes, we try to simulate the same exact warm-up that they're going to be doing in a competition setting because we don't want to leave that to chance. We want them to physically and mentally prepare the exact same way in training that they will do in competition, so that when they get to competition, they have the exact same type of trigger to stimulate them getting into the zone so that they're prepared and ready to train and ready to compete. Do the same in your training session. Whether you're going in to lift weights, whether you're going in to train, you need to have some sort of system in place that mentally prepares you and physically prepares you for the training session that you're about to perform. All right, and with the mental components and the attitude that we want to achieve out of the way, we can take a bit of a deeper look into physically how to prepare the body. There's 3 goals that I try to keep in mind when warming up the body. Number 1, we want to promote blood flow. Really important that you're sending blood through the body, increasing the heart rate, developing a bit of a sweat so that your muscles are physically ready and stimulated for when you get into your practice. Number 2, we want to mobilize the joints. It's much better to ensure that you have a surplus of a range of motion throughout the entire body to avoid injury. Number 3, we want to stimulate the right movement patterns. This is going to go into making sure you know what the demands are of the training session that you're about to do. If you have a better idea of what you're about to get into, you'll have a better idea of what specifically you'll need to do in order to warm up effectively for what you're about to perform. So, creating blood flow. Now, this can be done in a couple ways. The typical way would be to go and sit on a bike or to run or jog for 5 to 10 minutes. Personally, I hate doing both. So I find that I just promote blood flow throughout the entirety of the warm-up. When training gymnastic athletes, we'll start with a run and then we'll start with some basic lines on the floor, moving through motor patterns that we're gonna use during the training session that are also gonna start to stimulate the range of motion in the body and that are also gonna stimulate movement patterns that we're gonna be using. If we're looking at strength training, we can start to consider the movements of all the joints that we want to stimulate in order to have the best and most successful training session. Now, when we look at mobilizing and when we look at stimulating, I kind of think of this in two different arenas. Number one is for skill training. We're looking at getting ready for the sport of gymnastics when we're getting on to events. What we're gonna do, I'm gonna head over to the gym and I'm gonna show you some ways that you can achieve these 3 goals: blood flow, mobilization, and stimulation for working on gymnastic strength training. Let's get to the gym.